Winners and How They Succeed by Alastair Campbell. Picture this. You're lying awake in a New York hotel room at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, your mind racing. All because of a question someone asked you earlier that evening. This actually happened to Alastair Campbell. Here's a guy who served as chief strategist for British Prime Minister Tony Blair, someone who'd fielded thousands of tough questions over the years. But this one hit differently. A woman at his conference had asked him something devastatingly simple. How do you deal with going from having a world-changing mission to, well, just doing stuff? Come on, she said. It looks like fun, but is it meaningful compared with what you did before? That question kept him up all night. He couldn't shake it. The next morning, bleary-eyed and exhausted, he spotted her at breakfast. He walked over and asked how she'd managed to crawl so deep into his head. Then he asked what people usually ask when they'd been hit with a painfully personal question. Was this really about you? She smiled. No, not me. My boss. I'm worried about what he does and how he'll cope after he stops doing what he does. Her boss? Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated boxing champion, one of the richest athletes on the planet. Campbell, never one to miss an opportunity, said something like, well, the least you can do after keeping me awake all night is get me an interview with him. And incredibly, she did. That chance encounter became one of the key interviews in what turned out to be an extraordinary investigation into what makes people win. Today we're exploring Winners and How They Succeed by Alastair Campbell. Campbell went on a global journey to sit down with some of the most successful people alive. Leaders like Bill Clinton and Angela Merkel, business titans like Richard Branson and Anna Wintour, sports legends like Jose Mourinho and Garry Kasparov. He wasn't just collecting inspirational stories. He was hunting for the common thread, the universal principles that separate those who merely compete from those who consistently win. This book is essentially a blueprint. It's an exploration of the mindset, the strategy, and the sheer determination that defines the world's highest achievers. And by the end of our time together, you'll have a new framework for looking at success. You'll understand the essential building blocks that all victories are built on, and you'll walk away with a clearer map for your own ambitions, whether they're on a sports field, in a boardroom, or anywhere else. So let's dive in and discover what it truly takes to become a winner. When you hear the word strategy, what comes to mind? For most people, it's just a fancy corporate word for plan. But for Alastair Campbell, someone who lived and breathed political campaigns, strategy is everything. He had a three-word mantra he called the Holy Trinity: strategy, leadership, and teamship. And of these three, strategy always comes first. He used to have a sign on his desk during election campaigns that read, "We don't do God, but we do strategy." So what exactly is this all-important concept? Campbell breaks it down into a beautifully simple formula he calls OST. O is for objective. S is for strategy. T is for tactics. Sounds simple, right? But here's where most people and organizations completely mess up. They confuse these three things. Your objective is your destination. It's where you want to go. And it can't be vague like I want to be successful. It has to be specific. Campbell gives the example of running a marathon. His objective wasn't to win the race. That would have been impossible. His objective was to finish in under 4 hours. That was his definition of winning. For a struggling football team, the objective isn't to win the league, but to avoid getting relegated. You have to define what winning actually looks like for you. Once you've got your objective, you need your strategy. This is the big, overarching plan to get you there. It's the how. If your objective is to get in shape, your strategy might be combining diet and exercise. Campbell points to Steve Jobs' return to Apple in 1997. The company was failing. Jobs' strategy could be summed up in one word: simplification. He took a company with dozens of confusing products and reduced them to just 4. The strategy was clear, powerful, and it saved the company. Finally, you have tactics. These are the specific actions you take to execute your strategy. If your strategy is diet and exercise, your tactics are things like counting calories, joining a gym, and taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Here's the fatal mistake most people make. They confuse tactics with strategy. A regional sales tour is a tactic, not a strategy. A new logo is a tactic, not a strategy. Campbell uses the example of former British Prime Minister David Cameron. He calls Cameron a strategic butterfly, flitting from one tactic to another, posing with sled dogs one day to seem environmentally friendly, talking about the big society the next, without a clear, consistent strategy holding it all together. The public sensed this. They saw a man who looked and sounded the part, but they weren't sure what he truly stood for. As Campbell says, if you do not have a clear objective, you have no definition of winning. If you do not have a clear strategy, you have no chance of winning. And if all you have are tactics, you have no right to win. One of Campbell's most crucial rules is this: it's not strategy until it's written down. He calls it thinking in ink. Great strategies can be expressed as a single word, a phrase, a paragraph, a page, and a book. For his New Labour campaign, the word was modernization. The phrase was New Labour, New Britain. Writing it down forces clarity. It forces you to have the difficult arguments and debates before you act, not after. And once you have your strategy, you must repeat it endlessly. Campbell has a golden rule. Just when the communicator is getting bored with saying something, that's when there's an outside chance of it reaching public opinion. You have to talk about your vision so often that you get sick of hearing yourself say it. Only then is it starting to break through the noise. But even the greatest strategy in the world is just a piece of paper without a leader to drive it and a team to execute it. This brings us to the other two pillars of the Holy Trinity: leadership and teamship. When you think of a great leader, you probably picture someone charismatic, a powerful speaker, someone who commands a room. But Campbell challenges this idea right away, with the example of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She isn't a soaring orator like Barack Obama. She isn't a backslapping charmer like Bill Clinton. She's a scientist by training, pragmatic, serious, and steady. Her fashion choice is basically a uniform of different colored jackets of the same design, a deliberate move to avoid commentary and project consistency. So what makes her a winner? The economist J.K. Galbraith once said that the one characteristic all great leaders share is the willingness to confront unequivocally the major anxiety of their people in their time. This, Campbell argues, is the essence of leadership. It's not about style, it's about focus. Merkel's leadership during the Eurozone crisis was a masterclass. She was under immense pressure to act quickly, to be bold. But she refused to be rushed. She focused on the long term, absorbed the criticism, and ultimately got her way, emerging stronger. Great leaders aren't distracted by the day-to-day noise of the media. Bill Clinton told Campbell, "Too many decision-makers define their reality according to that day's media. It is almost always a mistake." A true leader has the discipline to stay focused on their strategic objectives, even when it's unpopular. And they're not afraid to surround themselves with people who are smarter than they are. The greatest example of this is Abraham Lincoln. After winning the presidential nomination, he didn't fill his cabinet with loyal followers. He built a team of rivals, appointing the very men who had fiercely competed against him to the most powerful positions in his government. Men who had called him a long-armed ape ended up becoming his most devoted allies. Lincoln understood that to achieve his monumental objective, saving the Union, he needed the absolute best talent, regardless of their past opinions of him. As he famously said, "I destroy my enemies when I make them my friends." This brings us to the final part of the Trinity, teamship. Campbell tells a wonderful story about an exercise he did with the British and Irish Lions rugby team. They were split into small groups and given blank canvases. They had no idea what they were painting, only that they had to work with other teams to get the right colors and make sure the lines on their canvas matched up with the ones next to them. When they finished, all the individual canvases were assembled into one giant frame. The result was a stunning, enormous image of the Lions logo. The players, huge, tough men, stood there amazed at what they'd created together without even knowing the bigger picture. That's the power of a great team. And a great team is made of more than just stars. Campbell introduces a brilliant framework: leaders, warriors, and talent. The leaders set the direction. The talent makes the difference. They're the star players. But it's the warriors who make the trains run on time. They're the unsung heroes. Campbell tells the famous story of President Kennedy visiting NASA. He saw a cleaner mopping the floor and asked him what he did. The cleaner replied, "Sir, I am here to help put a man on the moon." He was a warrior. He understood the objective and knew his role in it, no matter how small it seemed. A winning organization ensures that everyone, from the CEO to the cleaner, understands their part in the mission. But what happens when the talent becomes bigger than the team? This is one of the greatest challenges for any leader. Sir Alex Ferguson, the legendary manager of Manchester United, faced this when his star player, Roy Keane, publicly attacked his teammates in an interview. Keane was a phenomenal talent and the team captain, but in that moment, he challenged Ferguson's authority and the unity of the team. Ferguson's strategy was built on control and the principle that no individual is bigger than the club. He made the difficult decision to terminate Keane's contract. In the short term, the team suffered. But in the long term, Ferguson protected the culture of the team, and they went on to win 3 consecutive league titles and the Champions League. A leader must be prepared to make short-term sacrifices for long-term strategic health. This holy trinity, objective, strategy, tactics, a focused leader, and a united team, is the essential blueprint for success. But as Campbell discovered on his journey, it's only half the story. The blueprint is useless without the engine that drives it. And that engine is the mindset of the winner. What truly separates those who succeed from everyone else is what goes on between their ears. It's the attitude they bring to a challenge. Campbell found that across sport, business, and politics, the most successful people share a particular mental wiring. It starts with a simple question: who wants it more? Everyone wants to win, but the will to win, Campbell explains, isn't about wanting to win. It's about needing to win, and then being prepared to do whatever it takes to make that happen. This drive often comes not from a love of success, but from an absolute dread of failure. Many of the winners Campbell spoke to, from cyclist Dave Brailsford to Aussie rules legend Lee Matthews, confessed, "I hate losing more than I love winning." This hatred of defeat was perfectly captured in Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame induction speech. He didn't spend his time thanking his supporters. Instead, he thanked the people who had doubted him. He thanked the player who was picked for the varsity team when he wasn't. He thanked the rival players who were deemed better than him. He thanked the journalists who criticized him. Every single setback, every single doubter, became fuel for his fire. His entire career was a relentless mission to prove them all wrong. This drive ensures that winners never get comfortable. The comfort zone, Campbell argues, is the enemy of excellence. Garry Kasparov, the greatest chess player in history, told Campbell about the time he lost his world title. He said, "I was at a very high peak and felt invincible. Not only did this make me complacent, but it also meant I had ceased to grow. I was crushing the competition, so why worry?" He learned the hard way that the moment you feel comfortable is the moment you start to lose. This is why winners embrace pressure. They see it as an opportunity. As sports psychologist Andy McCann puts it, pressure exists because this matters. But there's a fine line between productive pressure and destructive stress. The key is preparation. Clive Woodward, the coach who led England to a Rugby World Cup victory, learned this from the Royal Marines. They told him how they survived a deadly skirmish because they had gone over that exact scenario in training again and again. When the real thing happened, their training kicked in automatically. Woodward adopted this philosophy, creating the mantra teacup, think correctly under pressure. The more you prepare for what might go wrong, the better you'll handle it when it does. This level of preparation requires an almost obsessive focus. Perhaps no one embodies this more than Tiger Woods. His former coach described how, during practice, Woods would take breaks and just stand in silence, replaying the last 20 shots in his mind. He was analyzing, learning, and concentrating on his weaknesses. It wasn't just practice. It was, in the coach's words, like his church. This obsessive drive is a common thread among winners. Billy Beane, the innovator behind the Moneyball strategy in baseball, told Campbell, "The reason all really successful people have to be slightly mad is because people like that are not capable of living in the comfort zone. They have what Campbell calls an extreme mind. This can be a double-edged sword." The book doesn't shy away from the dark side of this obsession, using the story of Lance Armstrong as a cautionary tale. Armstrong once told Campbell, "When I was sick, I didn't want to die. When I race, I don't want to lose. Dying and losing, it's the same thing." At the time, Campbell saw it as the ultimate winning mindset. In hindsight, it was a terrifying confession. If you equate losing a bike race with losing your life, you'll do absolutely anything to win. And he did. Armstrong's story is a stark reminder that winning without integrity is the ultimate loss. But the extreme mind can also be a source of incredible power. Campbell points to historical figures like Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln, both of whom suffered from severe depression. Some historians believe their depression gave them a deep sense of realism, allowing them to see threats, like the rise of Nazi Germany, that more optimistic leaders dismissed. Their struggles gave them a resilience and empathy that became a core part of their leadership. One of the most powerful tools of the winning mindset is something anyone can learn: visualization. Campbell tells an incredible story about spending a morning with the legendary footballer Diego Maradona at an empty Old Trafford stadium. Maradona walked onto the pitch, looked around at the empty stands, and started imagining the game. He visualized how he would play, how he would score. Then he started taking practice shots into an empty net. Each time the ball went in, he would run off, celebrating wildly, screaming with joy, as if he'd just won the World Cup. When Campbell asked him what he was doing, Maradona simply said, "You must visualize the victory." This isn't just wishful thinking. Scientists have found that the brain can't really distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you visualize success, you're creating the neural pathways for that success. But true winners don't just visualize things going perfectly. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, would spend hours visualizing not only winning a race, but also what he would do if something went wrong. He imagined his goggles filling with water. And then, in the final of the 200-meter butterfly at the Beijing Olympics, it actually happened. He was blind, but because he had visualized this exact scenario countless times, he didn't panic. He started counting his strokes, timed his turn perfectly, and not only won the race, but broke the world record. He had turned a potential disaster into a victory because he was prepared for it in his mind. This leads to the final and perhaps most important quality of a winner: resilience. It's the ability to handle setbacks, to face crises, and to emerge stronger. As Nelson Mandela said, "Do not judge me by my successes, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." Campbell defines a true crisis not as a mere problem, but as an event that threatens to overwhelm you if you make the wrong decisions. His masterclass in crisis management comes from an unlikely source: Bill Clinton, during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. The scandal threatened to destroy his presidency. His enemies were circling, the media was in a frenzy, and he was, in his own words, sleeping on the couch. How did he survive? He told Campbell his objective was simple: survival. And his strategy was even simpler: get on with the job. He focused relentlessly on the things that only he, as president, could do. He refused to let the media storm define his reality. He knew that if he spent his days answering questions about the scandal, that's all the public would see. So he focused on his work, trusting the American people to see that he was still doing the job they elected him to do. He stayed focused on his objective and didn't get lost in the tactical battles. But resilience is more than just surviving a crisis. It's about getting good out of bad. Campbell calls this the GGOOB principle: he shares the astonishingly powerful story of Australian surfer Layne Beachley. Her life began with trauma. She was the product of a rape and was given up for adoption at birth. Her adoptive mother died when she was just 7. When she finally learned the truth about her origins, it awakened something in her. A burning desire to become a world champion at something, to prove she was worthy of love and respect. Her entire career was a struggle. She lacked the natural talent of her rivals and had to work multiple jobs to fund her dream. She was plagued by depression and self-doubt. Yet she persevered, winning 6 consecutive world titles. But here's the extraordinary part. She felt no joy in it. She had trained her mind to believe that she could only succeed through struggle, so winning brought only relief, not happiness. It was only after losing her title, battling injury and depression, and then fighting her way back to win a 7th world championship, that she finally experienced the pure joy of victory. She called it, quote, the sweetest win of all. Her entire life was a testament to resilience, to falling down and getting back up, again and again, until she finally found peace, not just in winning, but in the journey itself. In the end, Campbell's journey reveals that winning isn't a single act, but an art form. It's the art of clear strategy, courageous leadership, and unbreakable teamship. It's the art of forging a mindset that is obsessive, focused, and relentlessly driven by a hatred of losing. And above all, it's the art of resilience, the profound understanding that setbacks aren't the end of the story, but merely the beginning of the next chapter. Winners, Campbell shows us, aren't those who never fail. They're those who refuse to be defeated. As we wrap up our journey through Winners, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on the sheer power of the ideas Alastair Campbell has gathered. What strikes me most is that this isn't a book about secret formulas or magic bullets. It's a book about something far more fundamental: character and discipline. The world today is noisier than ever. We're bombarded with distractions, conventional wisdom, and pressure to conform. In this environment, the principles in this book, clarity of purpose, relentless focus, and the courage to be different, aren't just valuable. They're essential for anyone who wants to achieve something meaningful. Campbell's central idea of the Holy Trinity, strategy, leadership, and teamship, is a timeless framework. In a world that often rewards short-term tactics and flashy gestures, the discipline of defining a clear objective and sticking to a long-term strategy is almost radical. It's the difference between being a strategic butterfly, as he calls it, and being a force of nature. But for me, the most powerful lesson lies in the exploration of the winner's mindset. The idea that you must hate losing more than you love winning, that you must embrace pressure, that you must constantly fight against the comfort zone. This is the raw, unfiltered truth of high achievement. It's not always pretty. The stories of obsession, of personal sacrifice, of the extreme mind, reveal that greatness often lives on the very edge of what we consider normal. And yet there's profound hope in these pages. The stories of resilience, from Nelson Mandela forgiving his jailers to Layne Beachley finding joy after a lifetime of struggle, teach us that our setbacks don't have to define us. They can, in fact, become the very source of our greatest strength. So how can you apply these powerful ideas to your own life, starting today? Here are a few simple actions you can take. First, try the exercise that Warren Buffett suggested. Take a piece of paper and write down the name of the person you admire most. Then, list the qualities that make you admire them. On the other side, write down the person you respect the least and list the qualities that turn you off. Buffett's advice is simple. The qualities you admire are habits you can choose to adopt. The qualities you dislike are habits you can choose to avoid. Your character, he says, is a choice. Second, practice the OST framework on a small scale. Pick one goal you want to achieve this week. It could be finishing a school project, improving at a sport, or even cleaning your room. Write down your objective. What does done and done well look like? Your strategy, the big picture plan, and your tactics, the specific steps you'll take. Experience the power and clarity that comes from this simple act of thinking in ink. And finally, practice visualization. The next time you face something that makes you nervous, a test, a presentation, a difficult conversation, spend 5 minutes beforehand closing your eyes and running through it in your mind. But don't just visualize it going perfectly. Do what Michael Phelps did. Visualize what you'll do if something goes wrong. This simple mental rehearsal can transform your relationship with pressure, turning fear into focus. That was a summary of Winners and How They Succeed by Alastair Campbell. We've explored the core principles today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a great mountain range. It can show you the peaks and the paths, but it can never replace the feeling of actually making the climb yourself. The real magic of this book happens when you're reading it and a particular story, perhaps of a leader you've never heard of, or an athlete whose struggles mirror your own, connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning the secrets of winners. It's an experience that might just change how you see your own potential. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas inside the world's most influential books, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. Your support allows us to keep creating this content, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.